The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Ambassador HFY of the Zolonian Republic stood at the central podium, his scaled hands trembling as he addressed the assembled representatives of 47 species. For 300 years, this hall had been the heart of galactic civilization, a place where former enemies now worked together in unprecedented harmony. "My fellow beings," HFY began, his voice echoing through the crystalline dome, "today marks the tercentennial of the Great Peace. 300 years since the last human ship was destroyed, 300 years since we freed ourselves from their tyranny." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Vorthak delegate's mechanical voice box clicked approvingly, while the ethereal whisper floated in patterns of satisfaction. Even the militant Orcs had laid down their weapons generations ago, finding prosperity in trade rather than conquest. Dr. Senna Orcs, the Altarian xenohistorian, activated the central holographic display. Images of humanity's brief but devastating reign appeared, massive dreadnoughts that had carved through space like instruments of death, orbital bombardments that had turned entire worlds to glass, and the cold, calculating faces of human commanders who had treated other species as little more than obstacles to expansion. "Let us remember," Dr. Orcs said, her crystalline voice ringing with scholarly authority, "how close we came to extinction. In less than 2 centuries, humanity had conquered over 600 worlds, enslaved entire species, and shown no mercy to those who resisted." The assembly watched in somber silence as the historical records played out. The siege of Proxima Station, where human forces had used civilians as shields. The massacre at Kepler's Edge, where an entire generation of Zolonian younglings had been eliminated to prevent future resistance. The systematic harvesting of Vorthak technology, stripping away centuries of mechanical evolution for human benefit. "But we endured," continued Dr. Orcs. "We united as never before. Every species, every faction, every world came together with one purpose: to end the human plague forever." The final battle had been fought in the Sol system itself. A coalition fleet, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, had surrounded Earth and its colonies. The humans, for all their vaunted military prowess, had finally been overwhelmed by sheer numbers and the desperate fury of an entire galaxy seeking liberation. Ambassador HFY stepped forward again. "Today, we celebrate not just victory, but the peace that followed. No more genocidal campaigns. No more species driven to extinction. No more worlds stripped bare for the insatiable human appetite for conquest." As if on cue, every communication system in the chamber began to pulse with an incoming transmission. The frequency was unlike anything in their databases, ancient, powerful, and carrying a harmonic resonance that seemed to bypass their technology entirely. "What is that?" whispered the Orcs representative, her warrior instincts flaring despite 3 centuries of peace. Dr. Orcs was frantically checking her instruments. "The signal. It's originating from outside the galaxy. But that's impossible. We've monitored every transmission for 300 years. Nothing has ever." The signal resolved into a clear transmission, and every being in the chamber felt their blood turn to ice. The voice that filled the hall was unmistakably human, calm, cultured, and carrying an undertone of barely controlled rage. "Greetings to the usurpers who thought they had won." The holographic display flickered and changed, showing not historical records, but a real-time image of space beyond the galactic rim. There, emerging from the darkness between galaxies, came a sight that defied comprehension. Ships, but not the crude, brutal human vessels of old. These were something far worse, elegant engines of destruction that seemed to bend light around their hulls, each one larger than the greatest space stations the Coalition had ever built. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the 5th Exodus Fleet of the Human Imperium. We have spent 300 years in the void between galaxies, and we have not been idle. Kethvar staggered backward, his scales paling to a sickly white. Impossible. We destroyed them all. We watched Earth burn. The human admiral's face appeared on the display, a woman who should have been dead for centuries, yet looked no older than 40. Her eyes held depths that spoke of technologies beyond current understanding. And when she smiled, it was the expression of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. You destroyed the colonies, yes. You glassed Earth and its pathetic defensive fleet. But you made one critical error. You assumed that represented all of humanity. You never found the deep space installations, the generation ships that had already departed, the research stations hidden in the void between stars. The chamber erupted in panic as the implications became clear. Dr. Orcs was frantically pulling up star charts, her voice shaking as she read the data. Long-range sensors are detecting fleet signatures throughout the outer rim. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Admiral Chen continued with the same terrible calm. For 3 centuries, we have grown. We have evolved. We have prepared. While you celebrated your victory and grew soft in your peace, we transformed ourselves into something you cannot imagine. The display showed close-ups of the approaching vessels. They bore no resemblance to the human ships of old. These were works of art and terror, combined hulls that seemed to phase in and out of reality, weapon systems that appeared to be carved from crystallized space-time itself, and most disturbing of all, crew members visible through transparent sections who looked human but moved with an inhuman precision that suggested fundamental changes to their very nature. We learned from our defeat, Chen said. We learned that individual conquest was inefficient. So we became something greater. We merged our consciousness, enhanced our bodies, transcended the limitations that made us lose to you in the first place. Kethvar found his voice, though it cracked with terror. What do you want? Surely after 3 centuries, we can find some way to coexist. The galaxy is vast enough for coexist? Chen's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. You made coexistence impossible when you chose genocide. Every human child who died in your bombardments. Every colony world you turned to ash. Every life cut short in your righteous crusade for freedom. Did you think there would be no accounting? The display shifted to show tactical readouts as the human fleets took positions throughout the galaxy. They had somehow bypassed every early warning system, every defensive perimeter, every carefully constructed safeguard that the coalition had built over 3 centuries of peace. You will discover that evolution is a two-way street, Chen continued. You evolved cooperation. We evolved vengeance. You chose to believe we were gone forever. We chose to make sure you would wish we were. The Vorthak delegate's mechanical voice crackled with desperate authority. Our combined fleets still number in the millions. Even with your technological advantages, we have the numbers too. You have nothing, Chen interrupted. Check your defense grids. Across the galaxy, every major military installation, every shipyard, every fleet command center received the same message simultaneously. Human vessels had somehow materialized within their supposedly impregnable defenses. The technology they displayed made the coalition's greatest achievements look like Stone Age tools. Ambassador Kethvar collapsed into his seat, finally understanding the true scope of what they faced. You've been planning this for 300 years. Every moment, Chen confirmed. Every day we spent in the dark between galaxies was devoted to this single purpose. We studied your psychology, your technology, your weaknesses. We became the perfect weapon against everything you thought made you strong. Dr. Orcs, her scientific mind still struggling to process the impossible, managed to ask, How did you advance so far while we could barely detect your presence? Pain is the greatest teacher, Chen replied. Defeat is the ultimate motivation. While you grew comfortable in victory, we were forged in the crucible of absolute necessity. We had to become gods to survive, so we did. The chamber fell silent, except for the steady hum of the approaching human fleets. Every species that had celebrated their freedom for 3 centuries now faced the return of their greatest nightmare, evolved beyond their worst fears. "The age of your peace is over," Admiral Chen announced. "The age of human ascendancy begins. You taught us that mercy is weakness, that compassion is failure, that only total victory matters. Thank you for the lesson." As the transmission ended, Kethvar looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had known nothing but peace for their entire lives. They had no idea how to fight the war that was coming, while their enemies had spent 3 centuries thinking of nothing else. Outside the dome, the first human ships began to blot out the stars, and the galaxy learned that some sins could never be forgiven, only avenged.